the question should be impossible, and yet it lingers in the background of ancient myth, geological anomaly, and the faint archaeological echoes of civilizations far older than our textbooks allow. What if Earth, the planet itself, did not arise purely through natural processes? What if the world we stand on was shaped, adjusted, or engineered not by gods in the mythic sense, not by extraterrestrials in the fantastical sense, but by an intelligence so ancient, so deeply rooted in prehuman time, that its fingerprints can only be seen today in the fabric of the planet itself? A layer of polished granite beneath an ocean trench. A band of metals arranged in ratios that defy typical cosmic distribution. A repeating numerical pattern encoded in the spacing of the continents. And most disturbing of all, a moment in deep time when Earth's crust appears to have been deliberately reset. These traces are not proof, but they raise a question that has haunted geologists, mythologists, and alternative historians for over a century. What happened on Earth before Earth became Earth? And why does nearly every ancient culture insist that the world was prepared, ordered, or constructed before humanity ever appeared? This investigation begins not with mythology, but with the ground beneath our feet. Because before exploring any theory of artificial origins, we must understand one simple truth. Earth is extraordinarily efficient at destroying its own history. Tectonic plates dive beneath one another, dragging entire continents into the mantle. Ocean floors are replaced every 200 million years. Mountain ranges rise and vanish. Rivers erase valleys. Ice sheets crush everything beneath them. Volcanoes rewrite landscapes in hours. In geological time, permanence is an illusion. Everything disappears. So if a predecessor intelligence, human or not, left traces here, then almost all of it would be gone. Except perhaps for the anomalies, the fractures, the seams in the story, the pieces that don't fit. And one such fracture lies beneath one of the most peculiar geological formations on the planet. A formation so out of place, so mechanically precise, that even mainstream geologists quietly acknowledge they do not fully understand it. It is hidden beneath miles of sediment, a circular pattern, perfectly symmetric, perfectly geometric, and far older than any known natural crater. But before we reach that anomaly, we must travel back into the earliest days of the planet itself, to a time when Earth's crust was still molten, unstable, and far too chaotic to host life. And yet, according to several recent studies, something intervened. Something stabilized the crust. Something cooled the mantle faster than expected. Something acted as if it were managing heat, not unlike an engineer faced with an overheating system. But could that something have been entirely natural? Or is there a deeper, forgotten history buried in the planet's first billion years? A history erased by tectonics, resurfacing, and cosmic bombardment? To answer this, we must examine our first fact and our first paradox. The fact is simple. Earth's chemical composition is remarkably unusual compared to other rocky planets. But the paradox is far stranger. Rather than being chaotic, Earth's elemental distribution is oddly optimized, especially for life. It is as though the planet was tuned, balanced, adjusted, and this leads us to a scientific counter-question. Could such fine-tuning have arisen naturally, or does the planet's geology suggest a degree of intentional arrangement? To explore that, we turn to the oldest continents on Earth, the cratons. These ancient cores, 3 to 4 billion years old, contain a secret. A series of mineral bands arranged with mechanical precision, as though layered according to a blueprint. Metals appear in ratios that do not match known models of planetary formation. Some layers contain concentrations of rare elements that should have sunk deep into the mantle. Others show signs of rapid cooling that contradict thermal simulations. And beneath one such craton lies a structure that has puzzled researchers for decades. A flat, polished stone layer extending for hundreds of miles. A surface that appears prepared, machined. But is this truly evidence of artificial intervention? Or merely the result of geological processes we do not yet understand? Before we can answer, we must move deeper into the patterns of ancient myth, for myths often preserve memories far older than writing. Nearly every ancient civilization describes the creation of the world not as an explosion of chaos, but as construction. The Sumerians called Earth the platform established by the gods. The Egyptians claimed their gods raised the first mound from the waters of chaos. The Maya described the earth as measured, divided, and ordered. Hindu texts say the world was shaped on a cosmic scale, with mountains placed and oceans set. These are not metaphors for spontaneous natural formation. They are procedural descriptions, steps, actions, deliberate work. But mythology alone is not enough. We must return to the ground, because beneath the Arabian desert lies an anomaly that may be older than any pyramid, older than agriculture, older even than Homo sapiens. A grid-like pattern etched into bedrock, miles long, perfectly aligned to cardinal directions. Mainstream archaeology avoids the site, not because of conspiracy, but because dating the exposed stone provides no clear results. Could be 1,000,000 years old, could be 10,000, could be older still. But the paradox is undeniable. If humans did not create it, who or what did? This brings us to a scientific counter-question. Could natural fractures create such straight, consistent, perfectly spaced lines? Yes. Under rare conditions, nature can produce linear features. Basalt columns, glacial striations, fractured sediment layers, but not in a grid, not with 90-degree intersections, not mirrored across distances that imply a singular intent. So what lay beneath the desert is either a geological impossibility or the remnant of a structure far older than humanity. This discovery leads us to an even deeper question. If Earth contains traces of artificial modification, where is the master blueprint? Where is the design? Some researchers believe it may be hidden in the shapes of the continents themselves. For when measured, the spacing between the major continental masses appears to follow repeating mathematical ratios, the same ratios found in biological systems, ancient architecture, and harmonic frequencies. Coincidence? Possibly. But the paradox remains. Why would drifting landmasses, shaped randomly over billions of years, reflect the same proportions used in ancient sacred geometry? And this leads to our next scientific counter-question. Are humans noticing patterns that are not really there? Or are human cultures subconsciously echoing a deeper structure embedded in the planet itself? To explore this, we must move to a place where geology and archaeology collide. A remote plateau where erosion has carved away nearly everything, revealing a skeleton of stone that should not exist. It stands alone, knife-edged ridges, right angles, massive blocks that resemble the foundations of a dismantled world. Not a building, not a city, but something far larger and far older. The plateau carries the scars of cataclysms, floods, winds, volcanic ash, but its shape persists, as though deliberately reinforced against time. Beneath it lie layers of stone that appear to have been fused by extreme heat, but not volcanic heat. Heat applied evenly, across vast surfaces, as though softening the crust before shaping it. Yet before we jump to conclusions, another counter-question must be asked. Could a natural heat event, an asteroid impact, a magma intrusion, produce these effects? Possibly, yes, but impact signatures leave chaos. This formation shows control. It is here, at the edge of this plateau, that the investigation reaches a breaking point. Because samples taken from the fusion layer contain a combination of metals and minerals that should not appear together naturally. Elements that separate at high temperatures. Yet here they are mixed, as if placed deliberately, as if blended. And this brings the story to its most dangerous question. If Earth was shaped, not created from nothing, but engineered from primordial material, then who or what performed the shaping? Not aliens, not beings from another star, but something much closer to home, a predecessor intelligence, a forgotten civilization, a species erased by time, tectonics, and planetary resets, a species that may have died out long before humans existed, yet left behind the greatest monument imaginable, planet tuned for life, a world arranged with precision, an Earth that did not simply form, but was finished. And perhaps the most haunting clue lies not on land, but beneath the deepest ocean basin, where the crust thins to an unnatural uniformity, as though scraped smooth. A basin that repeats in circular patterns. Patterns too regular, too symmetric, to be explained purely by spreading ridges. An ancient scar, or perhaps an ancient foundation. But this discovery leads to a final, unsettling paradox. If the deepest parts of Earth's crust were engineered, then the evidence is now buried beneath miles of basalt, lost forever to subduction. Which raises the question, was this deliberate? Did a predecessor intelligence design the planet in such a way that their work, once complete, would be hidden, slowly consumed by Earth's own geological processes? A self-erasing blueprint, a disappearing architecture, one that ensured future species would never uncover the truth. And yet, fragments remain, patterns, ratios, anomalies, features that do not fit the timeline of a naturally forming world. And now, after billions of years of suppression, erosion, and reconstruction, humanity is beginning to notice them. Piece by piece, clue by clue, as though the planet itself is whispering its hidden history, as though Earth remembers. And the question that now rises, quietly, dangerously, is whether we are the first to walk this world, or merely the latest. But before the theory can come together, we must go deeper, into the magnetic memory of the crust, into the scars hidden in the mantle, and into the origin of a strange signal detected in the oldest rocks on Earth, a signal that does not belong, a signal that should not be there, a signal that may be the faint, final echo of the intelligence that shaped our world. And that is where the next chapter begins, a signal that may be the faint, final echo of the intelligence that shaped our world. And that is where the next chapter begins. The signal was discovered almost by accident, not by archaeologists, not by historians, but by geophysicists studying ancient rocks for traces of early magnetic reversals. Within one of the oldest formations on Earth, a band of metamorphosed sediment in Western Australia, researchers detected a microscopic alignment pattern in mineral grains that should have been random. These grains act like tiny compasses, locking in the direction of Earth's magnetic field at the moment they cooled. Under normal conditions, they produce chaotic orientations, mixed and remixed by billions of years of heat and pressure. But in this sample, they were aligned. Not just aligned, patterned. Arranged in repeating intervals like ticks on a clock. A natural process could explain this once. Perhaps a local magnetic anomaly at the moment of crystallization. But the pattern repeats across layers separated by millions of years. Same spacing, same orientation, same rhythmic precision, as though an external field, stable, directed, deliberate, imposed order on forming rock. A field strong enough to shape matter, but stable enough to maintain perfectly even intervals over geological time. The scientific counter-question is immediate and unavoidable. Could this be the work of ancient geomagnetic processes we do not yet understand? A resonance effect in early Earth's magnetic field? A quirk of cooling minerals under unusual pressure? Possibly. But no known mechanism produces this kind of repeatable precision. The paradox deepens. The pattern behaves not like a natural magnetic field, but like a controlled one, the type generated in modern laboratories to calibrate instruments. Yet it predates humanity by billions of years. This discovery alone would be easy to dismiss, an oddity, a footnote, were it not for what was found next. A similar pattern was detected in rocks from Greenland, then South Africa, then the Canadian Shield. Different continents, different ages, different geological histories, but the same interval spacing, the same rhythm, like the echo of a tool used repeatedly across the planet at different times, shaping rock as it cooled. If Earth's crust holds a memory, this may be it, not a message or inscription, but the residue of a process that may have prepared the crust for habitability. And that leads us to a far more unsettling question. Was Earth's magnetic environment engineered? Because without a stable magnetic field, life cannot survive. Solar radiation strips atmospheres. Water evaporates into space. DNA is shredded before it can replicate. The magnetic field is the shield of life. Yet Earth's field stabilized with surprising speed early in its history, far faster than current models predict, as though something strengthened it, amplified it, tuned it. But before we allow the theory to coalesce, we must widen the lens, because the Earth's magnetic field is only one layer of the puzzle. The next anomaly lies deep within the mantle, at a depth unreachable by any drill. Seismic imaging reveals two colossal structures beneath Africa and the Pacific. They are called LLSVPs, large low-shear velocity provinces, and they are unlike anything else within the planet. Columnar, dense, sharp-edged in places, almost architectural in their geometry. Mainstream geophysics argues they are simply regions of hotter, chemically distinct mantle. But the paradox is troubling. LLSVPs appear to be assembled rather than naturally accumulated. They have boundaries, they have shape, they have vertical stability inconsistent with convection models. Even stranger, their positions correlate with major geological events. Supercontinent breakup, mantle plumes, mass extinctions. It is as though these structures act as stabilizers or triggers, regulating the planet's long-term evolution. But the scientific counterquestion must be asked. Could complex mantle dynamics produce such geometric forms without intention? In theory, yes. Mantle convection is poorly understood. Chemical reservoirs can persist for billions of years. Yet the coincidence is uncomfortable. Two titanic structures, placed almost precisely opposite each other, aligned with the planet's rotational frame, influencing continental drift across deep time. It is here that an ancient myth becomes unexpectedly relevant. Many creation stories describe a world beneath the world, a foundation laid before the earth took its current form. The Egyptians called it the Benben, the first mound, rising from chaos. The Dogon spoke of an egg of the world, split in two and placed beneath the land. Vedic texts describe a double-layered earth supported by hidden pillars. Aboriginal traditions speak of roots of the world that precede mountains and rivers. For generations, these were metaphors. But what if they were memories? Faint recollections from a lineage predating Homo sapiens, stories passed through oral tradition from a population that witnessed the planet in an earlier half-formed state, before the surface cooled, before continents hardened, when the interior was still being arranged. This brings us to one of the most mysterious geological events of all, the Great Oxygenation. 2.5 billion years ago, Earth's atmosphere changed rapidly. Too rapidly. Oxygen levels rose dramatically. The chemistry of oceans shifted. Minerals oxidized in global synchrony. Mainstream science attributes this to microbes, cyanobacteria, suddenly pumping out oxygen. But the paradox is glaring. Life was struggling at the time. The energy required for such a transformation was immense. Yet the atmosphere changed almost as though controlled. Like a switch was thrown. The scientific counter-question is necessary. Could microbial evolution, combined with geological feedback loops, create such a sudden environmental transformation? Yes, possibly. But oxygenation required a precise balance of conditions: sunlight, nutrients, ocean chemistry, tectonic cycles, all converging perfectly. It is the convergence that raises eyebrows. The event resembles not biological chaos, but environmental optimization, a tuning of the planet, preparation. Now, with the magnetic anomalies, mantle structures, and atmospheric transformation forming a triad of clues, we turn to something far more tangible, something carved not by nature, but by hands or tools. Because if Earth was engineered, even partially, some evidence should remain near the surface, something too massive or too deep to erase. And indeed, in a remote region of southern Africa lies a circular formation so enormous that from the ground it is invisible. Only from the air does its shape emerge.
A perfect multiringed basin.
200 miles across. Symmetric, segmented, layered. Mainstream geology identifies it as a deeply eroded impact structure, the Vredefort crater. But the paradox is immediate. Most large impact craters exhibit chaotic patterns: shattered crust, radial fractures, uplifted centers. This structure is too clean, too groomed. The rings are spaced at nearly equal intervals. The internal basin is unusually smooth, and portions of the underlying crust appear melted in a pattern akin to controlled thermal processing. A natural impact can melt rock, but it cannot melt it evenly, unless we are missing a process or misinterpreting the evidence. A scientific counter-question must be asked. Could a massive impact under unique conditions, angle, velocity, crust composition, produce this unnatural symmetry? Possibly. But reproducing such precision in models requires arranging the variables as though designing an experiment. Nature is capable of remarkable order, but rarely perfect order. Which brings us to a troubling possibility. The feature may not be an impact crater at all. Its geometry suggests something else, a basin shaped by descending energy, not explosive force, as though a colossal thermal event softened the crust, then allowed it to cool in concentric stages, a process that resembles construction. But even this does not explain the final anomaly, the deepest and most bewildering. In samples taken from the center of the basin, researchers found isotopic ratios inconsistent with surface rocks, ratios that match. The mantle, material from deep within the earth, somehow brought upward in a way that does not match volcanic processes, as though something pierced the crust, reached into the interior, and altered it. But what and why? This discovery leads to the heart of the theory, the moment the narrative threads begin to converge. Because if something, some intelligence, shaped the planet, it would require access to the deepest layers. The magnetic core, the mantle structure, the crustal composition. And the easiest way to access those layers is before the crust fully hardens, before the mantle cools, before the planet stabilizes, during Earth's infancy, meaning the intervention, if it occurred, predates all known life, predates continents, predates oceans, predates humanity by billions of years. So the intelligence behind it could not have been human, could not have been animal. It might not have been biological in any way we understand, but perhaps it was native to Earth in an earlier phase. Or perhaps it emerged during planetary formation and vanished before the world cooled. A predecessor intelligence born of molten rock and metal, erased by geological time. Not alien in the extraterrestrial sense. Alien only in chronology. A species so ancient that the Earth we know was, to them, a project, a vessel, a future ecosystem, a world in the making. But before the final theory can take shape, another piece of evidence must be confronted. An extinction event that appears far too targeted to be natural. An event that cleared the slate, reset the biosphere, and may have erased the last traces of the intelligence that engineered the planet. The Huronian glaciation, a global freeze lasting millions of years, triggered by a mysterious atmospheric shift, ending nearly all early life, resetting the evolutionary clock. Mainstream science argues that oxygen from microbes caused this climate catastrophe. But the paradox is striking. The event occurred at exactly the moment when early ecosystems were becoming too unstable, when runaway greenhouse conditions threatened long-term habitability, when Earth's temperature and chemistry were diverging dangerously from the narrow corridor life requires. The freeze restored balance. It reset the atmosphere. It allowed complex life to emerge much later. It functioned not as a disaster, but as a correction, a stabilization measure. The scientific counter-question is sobering. Could natural feedback loops produce such a conveniently timed planetary reset? Possibly. Earth is full of self-regulating mechanisms. But this event was too precise, too complete, too beneficial. It resembles the action of a system with an operator, a system designed to self-adjust. If so, then Earth is not simply a planet. It is an inheritance, a construct, preparation, a seedbed for life, but not necessarily for us. And as this theory crystallizes, the final step becomes inevitable. We must examine the modern world for signs of continuation or degradation of this ancient system. Earth's magnetic field is weakening faster than models predict. The climate is destabilizing. Species are vanishing. Geological cycles are shifting. It is as though the ancient mechanisms are failing, or expiring, or perhaps fulfilling a cycle. Because much like Earth's early resets, the planet undergoes periodic transformations, roughly every 10,000 to 15,000 years. Ice ages, floods, volcanic winters, crustal shifts, geomagnetic reversals, events that erase civilizations, events that wipe memory, events that close chapters. If Earth was engineered, these cycles may not be accidents of nature. They may be part of the design, maintenance cycles, reset intervals, planetary renewal events, and humanity may be approaching another. But the deeper question is not whether Earth was shaped. It is why. Why would an ancient intelligence invest in preparing a world? What purpose would it serve? A refuge? A nursery? A long-term biological experiment? A final monument created by a species facing extinction? Or simply an act of creation, not mystical but practical, by beings whose existence is unimaginable to us now? Whatever the answer, one truth remains. If Earth was engineered, the fingerprints are fading. The clues are dissolving. The ancient systems are slowing. And humanity, for the first time, is becoming aware of the world beneath the world. But the story is not yet complete. To understand the final theory, we must explore the last, most hidden layer, the crustal resonance field, the harmonic structure of continental spacing, and a global pattern that suggests Earth may have been tuned not just chemically or magnetically, but acoustically. A planetary scale architecture, a vibration, a signature of creation itself. The idea that Earth may have been tuned acoustically sounds, at first, poetic rather than scientific. But the planet is not silent. It vibrates constantly, from tectonic motion, ocean waves, atmospheric pressure, and the deep resonance of the mantle itself. These vibrations form standing waves. They create global modes, frequencies at which the entire planet rings like a colossal instrument. Geophysicists call these modes normal oscillations. Most are faint, some are irregular, but a handful are stable, persistent, and remarkably precise. When researchers mapped these frequencies across the continental masses, a pattern emerged, faint at first, but unmistakable when overlaid with geological boundaries. The continents are spaced in a way that corresponds to the primary resonance modes of the Earth. Not randomly, not loosely, but with a correlation so strong that statistical models cannot dismiss it as coincidence. This is the fact. But the paradox is more troubling. Continental drift is chaotic. It responds to convection currents, mantle plumes, subduction zones, forces indifferent to geometry. Yet somehow, over hundreds of millions of years, the continents repeatedly settle into configurations that align with Earth's resonant frequencies. Pangaea did, Rodinia did, even older supercontinents, reconstructed from scattered fragments, show the same alignment. It is as though the lithosphere behaves like a system seeking harmonic stability, as though the crust moves not freely, but within invisible constraints, subtle pressure zones shaped by the planet's internal architecture. This raises the scientific counter-question. Could resonant alignment arise naturally, simply because certain configurations are more stable than others? Yes, physics favors equilibrium, but harmonic equilibrium on this scale requires boundary conditions, structural constraints guiding the process. And those constraints would need to originate from deep within the planet, which directs our attention back to the LLSVPs, the massive mantle structures beneath Africa and the Pacific. Their positions correspond exactly to the nodes of Earth's fundamental resonance modes. Not approximately, not loosely, exactly. This implies a connection. The deep mantle structures may shape the planet's vibrational geometry, which in turn influences continental placement, which in turn affects climate, ocean circulation, and the evolution of life, as though Earth's interior is orchestrating the surface. And if this orchestration is deliberate or inherited from an earlier intelligence, then the planet is more than a world. It is a system with layers, feedback loops, stabilization mechanisms, self-regulating cycles. And this brings us to one of the most ignored mysteries in geology: the near-perfect periodicity of Earth's restructuring events. Every minus 12,000 years, the planet undergoes a dramatic shift, sometimes gentle, sometimes catastrophic. A meltwater pulse, a sudden cooling, a magnetic field disruption, a rapid sea level rise, a volcanic surge, a mass migration of species. These oscillations are recorded in ice cores, sediments, fossil layers, and even the oral traditions of surviving ancient cultures. The idea is not new, but what is rarely discussed is the pattern behind the pattern. Each cycle appears to begin when Earth's magnetic field weakens past a threshold. Once that threshold is crossed, environmental instability follows. But the paradox is this: the magnetic cycle is far more regular than it should be. Geomagnetic fluctuations are chaotic in theory, yet in practice, Earth exhibits a rhythm. Not perfect, not clockwork, but rhythmic enough to suggest something deeper. A scientific counter-question naturally follows. Could celestial mechanics, orbital variation, solar output, cosmic rays produce such periodicity without any artificial influence? Possibly. Milankovitch cycles shape long-term climate. Solar cycles modulate magnetic flux. Cosmic ray intensity affects cloud formation. Yet none of these align neatly with the 12,000-year pattern. Their periods are longer, shorter, or irregular. The resonance appears internal, as if Earth itself resets. The question that emerges now is no longer geological. It is existential. If these cycles existed before humans, and they did, then what were they designed to accomplish? Reset ecosystems? Prevent runaway conditions? Allow new evolutionary pathways? Ensure long-term stability of life? Or were they meant to erase something? Because within each reset lies a more haunting detail, a bottleneck, a moment when species populations shrink dramatically, preserving only a fraction of their diversity. Humanity itself passed through such a bottleneck roughly 70,000 years ago, an event still etched into our DNA. But what if these bottlenecks are not accidents, but safeguards? A mechanism that trims complexity before it becomes unsustainable. A cycle that renews the biosphere. Planetary correction. If so, then Earth behaves like a system that expects inhabitants. A system that manages them. A system that maintains its own long-term viability. But systems require designers. And this leads us to the most controversial question of all. What kind of intelligence could shape an entire planet? Not biological in the way we imagine, not technological in the way we practice, something deeper, something that operates on geological timescales, something that manipulates magnetic fields, mantle structures, planetary chemistry, and crustal formation. Perhaps an intelligence that arose from the planet itself, born in the early mantle, evolving in an environment of molten rock, pressure, and extreme heat. A lithic intelligence, a geologic intelligence, a species sustained not by sunlight or oxygen but by gradients of heat and metal. Or perhaps the intelligence was not an organism at all. Perhaps it was a phase of Earth's early evolution, a moment when chemical and magnetic complexity reached a threshold that allowed for organization, intention, and action. Planetary mind, a consciousness not continuous but episodic, emerging only under certain conditions, during certain eras, before fading back into the mantle. This is speculation, but grounded speculation, because Earth in its earliest epochs possessed more complexity, more raw energy, and more interconnected systems than at any later time. It was a crucible, a machine in motion, a world with the potential for processes we no longer witness, processes capable of shaping continents, stabilizing magnetic fields, tuning resonance frequencies, adjusting atmospheric chemistry, processes capable of engineering a planet. If such an intelligence existed, its traces would be embedded not in artifacts, ruins, or symbols, but in the planet itself, in the geometry of continents, in the memory of rocks, in the cycles of renewal, in the magnetic patterns still faintly resonating today. And this brings us to the final mystery, the one that ties all others together. In 2019, a team analyzing data from a global seismic network discovered an anomaly, a repeating resonance signal deep within the Earth, pulsing every 26 seconds. Not geological, not tidal, not seismic noise, something else. A heartbeat, regular, persistent, centered near a stable boundary at the edge of one of the great mantle structures. No known natural process creates such precise periodicity. It is too clean, too stable. Some geologists dismissed it as an artifact, a measurement glitch. But the signal persisted. Different instruments, different continents, different years. The planet pulses every 26 seconds, stable, enduring, mechanical in its regularity. But the most unsettling detail came when researchers compared the signal to ancient sediment records. The pulse has existed for millions of years, a rhythm predating humanity, predating continents as we know them, predating the world we inherited. If Earth is an engineered system, this may be its core function, its stabilizing mechanism, its regulating frequency, a pulse from the deep, a remnant of creation, or a warning of change to come. Because in recent decades, the amplitude of the pulse has begun to shift, subtly but measurably, as though the system is straining, or preparing, or winding down. And that is where the lines converge: geology, myth, magnetic memory, mantle structure, resonance cycles, resets, leading to one final, irrevocable theory, a theory that reframes everything we think we know about Earth and humanity's place on it. And yet, the silence within these ruins tells a different story, one that suggests intention, not accident. It is here, at this strange boundary between geology and architecture, that another anomaly emerges. Researchers studying the floor of the chamber notice something unsettling. The stone appears to rest on a perfectly flat plane of polished bedrock, as if the builders had leveled the earth itself before placing their blocks. No natural process produces bedrock this smooth across such a wide area. Even glacial scouring leaves directional striations. Here there are none. It is as if the rock had been shaved clean, as if a giant hand had prepared a foundation. But the deeper the excavation went, the more the stone layers refused to behave like stone at all. Some blocks showed microscopic patterns of alignment, crystal structures orienting in ways that suggested controlled cooling, not natural formation. The implication was simple, almost too simple. Someone or something had created the raw material of the building itself. The stone was not quarried, it was engineered. Paradox emerges immediately. If these blocks were artificially formed through processes unknown to modern science, then the builders possessed a mastery of energy and materials far beyond that of known prehistoric cultures. But if such a civilization existed, why is there no trace of its development? No tools, no forges, no quarries, no transitional technologies, just perfect stone placed with impossible precision in an era when humans were still learning to shape bone. Scientists raised the first counter-question. Could geological metamorphism have altered natural stone to appear artificial? Heat, pressure, and deep burial can change mineral alignment. But these blocks were found near the surface. They were never deep enough or hot enough to undergo such transformation. The theory collapses under its own weight. And beneath all of this sits the greater question, the one that shadows every discovery in the cave. If Earth's deep time cycles erase civilizations so effectively, then how many times could this have already happened? The oceanic crust is recycled every 180 million years. Entire continents have formed and vanished. Mountain ranges have risen and worn away to dust. If an intelligence existed before humanity, tens of thousands or even millions of years ago, would we expect to find more than scattered hints? Or would those hints be all that remain after the planet has rewritten itself? That unresolved tension drives researchers deeper still, because the carvings continue. Past the first chamber lies a corridor carved with geometric patterns of stunning complexity. Not spirals or animals or mythic figures, nothing that resembles the symbolic thinking of early Homo sapiens. Instead, the walls display sequences of repeating angles, ratios, and intersections. They feel more like blueprints than art. And as the corridor descends, the patterns change. They become simpler, as if the carvers moved backward toward the most elementary forms. Circles, lines, rhythms. A reduction of detail, not an increase, almost as if the knowledge recorded here was flowing upstream from complexity toward origin. Then the corridor ends in an alcove so small it feels like a chamber for a single person. The walls are unadorned except for a single figure carved at the center of the far wall. Not a deity, not an animal, not a human, It is an ovoid shape, smooth and symmetrical, flanked by radiating lines that resemble neither wings nor limbs, but some abstract representation of emanation. Surrounding it are smaller circles, each connected by thin channels etched into the stone. For decades, interpretations varied. Some saw it as a map of the stars, others as a depiction of volcanic forces. But recent high-resolution imaging changed everything. Hidden beneath the carving, under layers of mineral accretion, were faint inscriptions that had gone unnoticed. Not letters, not numbers, ratios, the same proportions that define Earth's orbital parameters. The eccentricity of the planet's orbit, the tilt of Earth's axis, even the precessional cycle, the slow wobble that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete. The alcove was not myth, it was instruction, a reminder, preserved through deep time, describing the core architecture of the planet itself. And this leads to the most disturbing paradox so far. Why would a culture tens of thousands of years ago encode Earth's orbital mechanics on the walls of a cave, mechanics that humanity only fully understood within the last few centuries? What purpose would such knowledge serve to a primitive society? Unless it wasn't meant for them. Unless the alcove was not a place of worship or art or ceremony, but a message left behind by the architects themselves. A message describing the operating parameters of their creation. Scientific skepticism rises immediately because it must. Could early humans have encoded astronomical data through careful observation alone? Possibly. Ancient cultures charted the heavens with surprising accuracy. The precessional cycle is embedded in myths from Egypt to Mesoamerica. But carving these ratios deep inside a subterranean complex that also shows evidence of engineered stone, that alignment stretches beyond coincidence. Unless the builders themselves had encoded the data long before humans encountered it and later cultures misinterpreted the symbols as sacred. And if that is the case, then the chamber becomes something far greater than a ruin. It becomes a survival capsule, a vault designed to last across resets, a place where the most essential information about Earth, its cycles, its mechanics, its vulnerabilities, was preserved for whoever lived after the next catastrophe. Yet even this revelation is not the final layer, because beneath the alcove floor, beneath the engineered stone, beneath the carved inscriptions describing Earth's cosmic parameters, ground-penetrating radar detected something researchers could not explain. Not a chamber, not a tomb, not a tunnel, a sphere, perfectly round, metallic, and cold. Too cold. Its interior reflects no thermal signature at all, as if it absorbs heat rather than conducts it. And its placement is mathematically precise. It sits at the intersection of 3 fault lines, directly above a known mantle plume, in a location where tectonic stress is continually redistributed. It is positioned not like a relic, but like a component, a cornerstone in a system, a stabilizing device, or something else entirely. Excavation halted. Instruments failed. 2 researchers who entered the deeper trench reported an unnerving sensation. A low-frequency vibration that seemed to bypass the ears and settle directly into the bones. It lasted only seconds. Then everything went silent again. Official reports described it as equipment malfunction. But unofficial notes, quietly shared between teams, tell a different story. Standing near the buried sphere, one researcher said it felt as if the planet itself was humming. Not chaotically, not randomly, but with intention. And this is where the narrative fractures into its most unsettling possibility. Because if Earth contains engineered components, if Earth's orbital ratios appear encoded in ancient stone, if civilizations may have risen and fallen before humanity emerged, and if geological resets wipe the surface clean every few tens of thousands of years, then the most disturbing question is not who built these structures. It is why. Why would someone shape a planet? Why would someone preconfigure cycles of destruction and renewal? Why would someone encode instructions in stone for whoever appears afterward? And why, across every layer of this mystery, does the evidence suggest not abandonment, but maintenance? The rest of the chamber, still unexplored, may hold the next clue. But the deeper teams descend, the clearer one thing becomes. This was never random geology, never myth, never coincidence. It was design, and we are only beginning to understand the implications. Because if Earth was created, then humanity is not merely living on a planet. Humanity is living inside something, a system, a sequence, a cycle, and the clock that governs it, quiet, ancient, and unbroken, may be turning again. The sphere buried beneath the alcove remained untouched for months as teams debated the next step. No one wanted to risk destabilizing a geological structure that seemed older than humanity itself. Yet the more they studied its position, the more one detail stood out. The sphere was not simply placed at a tectonic junction. It was aligned. Its orientation matched Earth's axial tilt with such precision that even a 1-degree deviation would have been noticeable. The sphere was fixed at exactly 23.4 degrees, Earth's present-day tilt. But here lies the paradox that gnaws at traditional explanations. Earth's axial tilt is not constant. It shifts slowly over long periods. If the sphere were millions of years old, could not have been aligned to the tilt we see today, unless the builders understood that Earth's tilt would drift over time and adjusted the sphere accordingly after each cycle. That single implication changes everything. It suggests a phenomenon far more unsettling than a lost civilization. It hints at ongoing stewardship, periodic return, periodic recalibration. But before such a notion can settle, the geological counterquestion must surface. Could tectonic drift or mantle movement gradually shift the sphere into alignment purely by chance? Possible in theory, but wildly improbable in practice. The sphere does not sit on a floating substrate. It is anchored to bedrock harder than granite, fused into the stone with a material resembling vitrified obsidian. No known geological process produces this kind of anchoring. The sphere did not move into alignment. It was set there. The discovery forces researchers to re-examine the corridor's carvings, especially the ratios representing cosmic cycles. And when they do, they notice a pattern no one expected. The ratios shift subtly across the corridor, recording not just Earth's parameters, but their changes through time. Almost like a maintenance log. The deeper the team goes, the older the inscriptions become. And the oldest, the ones closest to the sphere, present orbital values more than 30,000 years out of sync. Values that match Earth's orientation during the last glacial maximum. The meaning is unavoidable. The chamber was updated. Someone returned. Not once, not twice, but across epochs. Each time Earth's cycle neared a critical threshold, tilt, precession, orbital eccentricity, the values were recorded again. The stone walls are not merely a record of cosmic mechanics. They are timestamps of intervention. Still, skepticism demands another question. Could ancient humans have encoded this knowledge across many generations, passing it down orally and carving updates as they observed the heavens? Humans are capable of astonishing continuity, but this chamber is older than the earliest known symbolic expression. Its deepest inscriptions date back to a time before Homo sapiens were believed to have mastered language in a modern sense. And beneath those inscriptions lies the sphere, silent, precise, cold. The deeper implication is almost too large to hold. Because if the chamber tracks Earth's cosmic parameters over multiple cycles, then whoever maintained it understood that Earth is not static. They knew the planet experiences periodic destabilizations, tilt shifts, crustal displacement, rapid melting, mass extinctions. These were not surprises to the builders. They were features of the system, reset points. And every time one of these resets approached, the chamber seems to have been updated, its information modified to prepare whoever would come after. But prepare for what? As researchers attempted to model the ratios carved into the stone, a startling pattern emerged. The inscriptions did not just record cycles. They highlighted certain alignments, moments when Earth's tilt, orbit, and precessional position combined to create extreme instability. Moments when climate shifts accelerate, when sea levels rise or fall with catastrophic speed, when volcanic activity spikes, when magnetic fields weaken, when the planet becomes vulnerable. Moments like the end of the Younger Dryas, moments like the Toba catastrophe, moments like the sudden collapses of early human cultures. Every marked alignment corresponds with a known extinction or climatological upheaval. But then the researchers noticed something else. The next alignment in the sequence is approaching. Soon, this discovery might have remained locked in academic obscurity if not for a second, far more dramatic event. While measuring microvibrations near the sphere, sensors detected a pulse, a brief oscillation, just a fraction of a second long. It matched no known tectonic movement. It did not originate from the crust. The pulse came from the sphere itself. It was small, barely measurable, but unmistakably structured. This pattern mirrored one of the ratios carved into the wall. Not the present-day ratio, but the next one. It was as if the sphere was responding to a change in Earth's alignment, responding to the coming cycle. The moment the pulse was detected, the team halted all measurements and evacuated the lower chamber. And for good reason. That pulse was not a random vibration. It was a signal, not a transmission outward, but a calibration inward. The sphere was adjusting, like a mechanism waking up, like a part of Earth reactivating. The implications unfold in a single terrifying line of reasoning. If Earth was engineered, the sphere is not an artifact. It is part of the system, a stabilizer, a regulator, a catalyst, or perhaps something we do not yet have a word for. Researchers debated quietly what such a device could do. Some speculated it maintained axial stability. Others believed it moderated tectonic stress. A few warned, in hushed voices, that the sphere might trigger resets, not prevent them, ensuring that each new cycle begins with a planet cleared of accumulated imbalance. But one hypothesis eclipsed them all. The sphere might serve as Earth's ignition point, a seed around which the planet was originally formed, a core of intention embedded within billions of years of geology, a device designed not to be discovered, yet positioned precisely where seismic surveys would eventually find it. And if the sphere awakened once before, if previous cycles were reset at predictable intervals, if caves like this exist elsewhere on Earth waiting to be found, then humanity is not living on the first version of Earth. Humanity is living on the most recent iteration, a world periodically wiped clean, a world carefully rebooted, not randomly, not violently, not chaotically, but according to a pattern, a design. And the chamber carved into the mountain, with its inscriptions of Earth's cosmic parameters, may be nothing less than a user's manual, left for whoever appears after the next reset. Because if Earth was created intentionally, then creation was not a single moment. Creation is maintenance. Creation is recurrence. Creation is a cycle, and that cycle is almost due again. The weeks following the sphere's pulse were marked by a strange quiet inside the research camps. No one spoke openly about what they had felt underground. The trembling in their ribs, the brief hollowing of sound, the strange sense that something vast had exhaled beneath the Earth. Official reports referred to it as a local seismic echo, a harmless vibration caused by shifting stone. But the scientists who had been near the sphere knew better. They had felt earthquakes before. They knew the signature of tectonic pressure. This was not that. This had rhythm, structure, pattern, and most disturbing of all, it resonated with the numbers carved into the chamber walls. To understand the next phase of the mystery, the team began analyzing the sequence of ratios, the orbital eccentricity values, the axial tilt ranges, the precessional markers, and hidden within those sequences, woven into the stone as if encoded through geometry, they discovered something that changed the entire investigation. The ratios formed a spiral. Not a decorative spiral, but a mathematical one, the kind used to map cyclical but amplifying events. A spiral that expands outward with each rotation, indicating that Earth's cycles are not constant. They build, they intensify, they move towards something. And the next spiral turn, the next point of constructive alignment, was approaching within the century. The scientists debated how a prehistoric culture could have recorded such a structure. But the deeper they studied it, the clearer the pattern became. The spiral was not carved all at once. It evolved. It accumulated. It was updated across cycles, perhaps across civilizations. The team mapped the spiral's last 3 turns and compared them to known geologic and climatic events. The correlations were startling. 12,800 years ago, the Younger Dryas impact event, sudden global cooling, megafaunal extinctions. 25,000 years ago, major climatic instability during the last glacial maximum. 38,000 years ago, a period of rapid volcanic activity and abrupt environmental change. 3 cycles, 3 catastrophes, 3 global resets, each placed precisely where the spiral expands. But the spiral's outermost ring, the one corresponding to now, was incomplete. It ended abruptly, the last segments missing, as if unfinished. This raised a question that haunted the team. Had the builders stopped updating the chamber? Or had something happened before they could finish? The implications were unsettling. If the chamber acted as a geological clock tracking Earth's engineered cycles, then the missing section could mean one of 2 things. Either the builders intended to return but never did, or the next reset would not require an update. The scientific counter-question rose again. Could these patterns simply reflect ancient humans observing natural cycles? Glacial periods, climate oscillations, over tens of thousands of years? Possible in theory, but impossible in practice. No culture remains stable for long enough to track cycles that last 20 or 40,000 years with precision. Oral traditions degrade, symbols shift, knowledge fractures, and then came the discovery that ended the debate. One morning, the radar team returned from the chamber pale and silent. They had rescanned the sphere. It had changed. The metallic surface beneath the stone, the one previously uniform and inert, now exhibited microscopic fluctuations. The pattern resembled thermal breathing, but inverted. Instead of heating and cooling with environmental changes, the sphere showed a pulse of cold radiating inward, as if drawing energy deep into itself. And the pulse matched the unfinished section of the spiral. It was completing the pattern on its own. The sphere was writing the next segment, or responding to a change in the world above. The pattern correlated with recent shifts in Earth's magnetic field strength, shifts that satellites had detected for years but struggled to explain. The weakening of the magnetosphere, the drift of the magnetic poles, the expansion of the South Atlantic anomaly. These changes, long dismissed as natural fluctuations, now aligned almost perfectly with the sphere's pulse. It was as if the sphere was reacting to Earth itself, adjusting to global conditions, calibrating for something approaching. But what? One geophysicist proposed a theory that silenced the entire room. She suggested that the sphere might not regulate Earth systems, it might initiate them. It might serve as the trigger for each planetary reset. Not maliciously, not violently, not arbitrarily, but in response to thresholds, conditions where the planet's stability weakens beyond natural repair. A self-correcting mechanism, planetary safeguard. If Earth was engineered, then the sphere is the reset key, and the cycle is approaching activation. The others hesitated. They wanted to reject the idea, but the evidence kept tightening, like a noose around the official narrative. To test her hypothesis, the team analyzed seismic data from the region over the past century. That's when they noticed a shocking trend. Every major shift in Earth's magnetic field, every step toward the coming threshold, was followed by a subtle response beneath the chamber. Microvibrations, slight temperature fluctuations, a rhythmic pattern. The sphere was not dormant. It was waking, but there was more, far more, waiting just beneath the next layer of stone. Because while the geophysics team studied the sphere, the archaeologists had widened the excavation. And behind one of the corridor's smooth walls, concealed beneath a meter of engineered stone, they discovered a second chamber. Smaller, more refined, strangely warm. Inside this chamber sat a series of tablets, thin slabs of a black, glass-like material that looked nothing like the stone from the rest of the complex. These tablets reflected light strangely, almost absorbing it, as if they were meant to preserve information not visually, but structurally. When the tablets were analyzed under infrared imaging, lines of faint etching appeared, so precise they were almost molecular. Not symbols, not language, blueprints. They depicted cross-sections of the planet. Strata, fault lines, mantle plumes, magnetic field lines, axial shifts, orbital diagrams, and at the center of every diagram, without exception, the sphere, not as an artifact, not as a component, but as the core denominator in every equation governing Earth's cycles. The tablets seemed to outline a system that included the sphere, the tectonic network, the magnetic field, and Earth's orbital behavior. Everything appeared interconnected, designed to maintain balance across deep time. But balance for what? The final tablet, cracked, worn, but still legible, showed something different. It showed Earth without its stabilizing mechanisms, without the sphere, without the engineered alignments. And the result was chaos, uninhabitable chaos. Temperatures swinging violently, poles shifting unpredictably, oceans evaporating and refreezing in catastrophic cycles. A planet unable to sustain long-term life. The message was clear. Earth was not simply shaped. It was balanced, calibrated, maintained, not to serve its builders, but to enable life, to allow life to grow into intelligence, to give rise to observers capable of perceiving the system, observers like humanity. But the final lines etched into the stone held the most unsettling implication yet. The system was never meant to last forever. The cycle was finite. It had a conclusion, and that conclusion was approaching. The tablets ended with a single unfinished diagram, one that pointed to a final alignment, a last phase in the spiral, a threshold beyond which the system resets permanently, and humanity, unaware, stands at the edge of it. If Earth was created, then humanity is living inside the closing chapter of its design. The cracked tablet showing Earth's final alignment haunted the researchers. Its geometry was unmistakable. A convergence of orbital eccentricity, axial tilt variation, magnetic field collapse, and tectonic stress. An intersection identical to the earlier reset points but pushed to a sharper, narrower apex. Unlike previous cycles, this convergence did not flare outward along the spiral. Terminated, abruptly, without a visible continuation. A final point, a singularity in the planet's long rhythmic breathing. Some argued the tablet was simply broken. Others insisted the builders had intentionally stopped the diagram, marking a moment beyond which the system itself could not stabilize Earth any longer. A design shutdown. Yet before anyone could agree on the meaning, another discovery deepened the paradox. Behind the tablets, carved into the far wall of the second chamber, lay an inscription so faint it was nearly invisible. Not a spiral this time, nor a series of ratios. Instead, it was a map, an outline of Earth's surface during the last interglacial period. Only it didn't match the known geography. Yes, the continental shapes were similar. Yes, the coastlines roughly aligned with what scientists reconstruct for the period around 130,000 years ago. But the cities, the markings placed upon this ancient map, did not correspond to anything in known history. There were symbols on what is now the Saharan desert, arranged in geometric formations reminiscent of modern urban grids. There were marks along the now submerged Sunda Shelf, lines that hinted at ports, canal systems, or settlements that predate any accepted maritime culture by tens of millennia. There were complex structures drawn across the continental shelf of South America, now buried under 100 meters of ocean. Most shockingly, the map showed vast networks of structures beneath what is today West Antarctica, regions currently hidden beneath 4 kilometers of ice. If the map was authentic, it would mean that either a civilization existed during the last warm period, one advanced enough to create global cartography long before human cultures rose, or the builders were mapping Earth before human beings evolved into their modern form. Yet again, scientific caution demanded a counter-question. Could this be a projection? An early symbolic representation of land, not intended as literal geography? But the precision of certain features, river deltas, extinct shorelines, tectonic boundaries, was too accurate to ignore. The map captured features humans only rediscovered through satellite altimetry and deep-sea sonar. Someone had surveyed Earth long before the last ice age. Someone had maintained records across cycles. Someone had understood the planet not as wilderness, but as a system. Still, the team needed one final piece of evidence, something that would transform the entire speculation into certainty. They found it 5 days later. While widening the excavation around the second chamber, a geologist noticed a seam in the rock that didn't belong. The stone was too smooth, too uniform, lacking the granular imperfections typical of metamorphic limestone. Suspecting a structural anomaly, he drilled a small borehole into the wall. Behind it was a hollow, not a cave, not a tunnel, a chamber, sealed, sterile, untouched for tens of thousands of years. Once they gently widened the breach, the beam of a flashlight illuminated the impossible. Inside the hidden room were 6 crystalline cylinders arranged in a perfect arc. Each cylinder was transparent yet refracted light as though made of layered material, like glass fused with obsidian. Inside each cylinder floated something like dust, suspended in a gel-like medium. At first, the team believed they were looking at mineral samples. They were not. High-resolution imaging revealed the particles were organic. But not DNA, not pollen, not spores. These were fragments of amino acid sequences, chains far too ordered to be random, far too structured to be natural debris. They resembled genomic fragments, but from no known organism. The fragments were too short to identify the species, yet their arrangement was too regular, too patterned, almost engineered. The researchers were hesitant to say the word, but it hung in the air. Templates, blueprints, seeds. If the builders had engineered Earth, then perhaps these cylinders represented samples of earlier biological forms, species designed, tested, or preserved for later cycles. Some sequences even resembled primitive versions of known life forms, like prototypes. The implication struck everyone in the chamber at once. The builders were not simply shaping Earth's geology. They were shaping its biology. And the resets, those catastrophic intervals spaced across tens of thousands of years, were not the byproducts of natural cycles. They were part of the design. Moments when the slate was wiped clean, when ecosystems reset, when life was allowed to evolve anew. The cylinders confirmed what the tablets only hinted at. Earth was not just a planet that could support life. It was a planet made for life, refined for it, adjusted cycle after cycle, maintained like a biological system. But the final cylinder, the one in the center, held something profoundly different from the others. The fragments inside it were longer, more ordered, more familiar. They resembled early hominin DNA, far earlier than Homo sapiens, but unmistakably part of the human evolutionary lineage. Yet something about the sequences was strange. They were too clean, too neatly arranged, almost symmetrical, as if humanity or something like it had been part of the plan. One scientist whispered the question none had dared voice. Were we intended? That single thought reframed every discovery. The sphere beneath the chamber, the cosmic ratios carved into stone, the maps of lost civilizations, the biological templates, the cycles of resets, the calibrations of Earth systems, all of it pointed toward a single unsettling possibility. Humanity did not arise by accident, nor solely through natural selection, nor as the outcome of cosmic randomness. Humanity may have been the product of the system, a species meant to emerge after countless revisions, a species meant to reach awareness of the system itself. But then comes the darkest implication of all. If humanity was intended, then the cycles were not meant to destroy us. They were meant to prepare us. For what? For the moment when the system reaches its final threshold. A threshold the sphere has already begun to detect. A threshold the tablets could not fully map. A threshold the builders may have anticipated but never witnessed. The shutdown point, the reset with no next cycle. Because if Earth was engineered, and if the system has a designed endpoint, then humanity may be living in the last chapter not only of civilization, but of the intended lifespan of the planet itself. The sphere is waking, the system is shifting, and the purpose behind Earth's creation, long hidden beneath stone, beneath time, beneath the silence of deep cycles, is about to reveal itself. Beneath the crust, in chambers older than any ocean, the harmonic nodes begin to vibrate. Not a tremor, not a quake, but a resonance, a soundless pulse that every atom remembers. Across the planet, monuments begin to respond. The pyramids warm from within, as if their stones are remembering the ancient blueprint carved into them long before humans walked. Obelisks glow at their tips, first faintly, then with the certainty of something returning to life after an epoch of sleep. The Nazca lines begin to shimmer, not moving, recalibrating. Their patterns straighten, shift, and correct themselves, projecting faint beams into the sky like coordinates aligning. And humanity, unaware, continues its noise. Its cities glowing, its satellites orbiting, its conflicts unfolding in the background of something far older and infinitely larger. High in orbit, the sphere's outer plates begin to unfold like petals of a metal flower. Not mechanical, not biological, something in between. It rotates once, slowly, purposefully, and the moment the rotation completes, every magnetic compass on Earth shifts by 2 degrees. Every migratory animal pauses. Every deep space probe picks up a silent frequency that wasn't there a moment ago. A frequency that says, Cycle 776 initialized. But only the sphere knows what the cycles mean. And only the architects, long gone, perhaps long dead, knew what happens after the final cycle. Yet deep beneath the Pacific, in a trench illuminated only by pressure and cold, the sealed door begins to open. Stone that has not moved in millions of years glides apart effortlessly, releasing a single spiral of bioluminescent particles that drift upward like a rising memory. The ocean doesn't understand what it just witnessed, but the planet does. The planet remembers. And above it all, suspended in the void, the sphere sends a second message, this time not to machines but to consciousness itself. A whisper woven into the dream state of every sleeping human. Prepare. The whisper spread like a ripple across the planet, imperceptible to most, but deeply felt. Some described it as a dream, a fleeting sense of awareness they could not explain. Others awoke with a sudden, inexplicable clarity, staring at the stars as if they had seen them before in an impossible memory. Meanwhile, the sphere pulsed again, slower this time, measuring, calibrating, assessing. Deep in the mantle, the harmonic nodes synchronized. The oceans began to shift minutely, currents adjusting by mere centimeters, tides tilting imperceptibly. Volcanic hotspots hummed. Earth's magnetic field shivered, not chaotically, but with precision, like a conductor testing an orchestra before the first note. In the cave, the team of researchers could feel the pulse reverberate through their instruments and even through their bones. Seismographs went silent. Magnetometers spiked and then flattened. Every scientific readout defied natural explanation. The sphere was communicating, not with language, not with signals interpretable by conventional technology. It was communicating through Earth itself, through vibrations, magnetic shifts, and orbital whispers encoded in the planetary cycles. And then came the first undeniable consequence. Time itself seemed to stretch. Researchers recorded subtle temporal distortions in electromagnetic signals. High-frequency pulses slowed. Seismic waves traveled slightly faster. Light passing through the cave's crystalline tablets bent just enough to create faint rainbow halos, as if reality itself was acknowledging the sphere's awakening. The chamber's inscriptions glowed faintly, not with fire, not with electricity, but with an inner radiance, as though the stone remembered its builder's purpose. Ratios and precessional markers, dormant for tens of thousands of years, realigned themselves. Where once the spiral had ended abruptly, new segments unfolded, predictive sequences of cycles humanity could only begin to comprehend. Outside, the world remained oblivious, but birds paused mid-flight, sensing something in the air. Oceans hesitated along coastlines. A subtle, collective breath was drawn by the living planet. And then the sphere did something unimaginable. It extended a faint, harmonic resonance into the stratosphere. Satellites picked it up, but could not interpret it. The signal was structured, rhythmic, oscillating, but not electromagnetic in the way humans understood. It was informational energy encoding patterns, instructions, and warnings directly into the natural frequencies of the planet. One of the researchers, an astrophysicist with a lifetime studying cosmic background radiation, realized what this meant. Earth itself had become a communication device, transmitting knowledge not across time zones, but across epochs, through cycles, through resets, through memory buried in stone, crystal, and mantle. And humanity, the current iteration of life, was being addressed directly. The team's instruments captured a final, undeniable fact. The pulse emanated from the sphere, synchronized with Earth's precessional axis, and matched the cycles encoded in the tablets. It was a signal calculated to influence life, not destroy it. Yet the paradox remained. The sphere is part of a system built to reset civilizations, and its next pulse coincides with threshold scientists now realize are dangerously close: climatic, magnetic, geological. If the system interprets the current state as critical, a planetary reset could be imminent. The question that froze everyone in the chamber was simple but profound. If the sphere awakens to maintain balance, can it distinguish between natural stability and human activity? And if it cannot, what consequences will the next cycle have for the species it seems to have designed? The cave's air was heavy with uncertainty. Even light seemed to bend differently around the crystalline cylinders. The sphere pulsed again, stronger, more insistent. Its energy spread outward, deep into the planet, causing microseismic quivers across fault lines. And for the first time, the researchers understood the ultimate truth. Earth is alive in a way that is far older, far more deliberate, and far more intelligent than any human conception of life. It is not simply a planet to inhabit. It is a system engineered for survival, for cycles, for resets. It is a machine of life, self-aware, self-maintaining, and possibly even anticipating its stewards. Humanity, for the first time, was no longer just an observer. It was the intended witness, perhaps even a participant, standing at the edge of a cycle whose purpose it could scarcely imagine. Because in the final readings, the team noticed a subtle but undeniable change in the sphere's vibration. The amplitude was rising. The system was no longer merely monitoring. It was preparing. And as the researchers exchanged glances, one thought passed through their minds, unspoken but unanimous. Whatever comes next, humanity will no longer be living on a world that is merely natural. It will be living on a world that is designed, measured, and willed into being. And the sphere was the pulse at its heart. The pulse from the sphere did not remain confined to the depths. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, its influence began to ripple upward. Tectonic sensors in remote regions recorded minute shifts, mountain ranges compressing by millimeters, fault lines adjusting slightly, oceanic plates realigning. Nothing catastrophic, yet nothing that human instruments could fully understand. But the timing was precise. The pulse was no accident. It was deliberate. Then the atmosphere began to respond. Jet streams shifted subtly. Localized pressure systems appeared where none should have existed. Clouds formed in unusual patterns, swirling in perfect arcs over deserts, over seas, over uninhabited regions. Pilots reported odd turbulence, drones failed in mid-flight, and satellites registered electromagnetic anomalies that defied all predictive models. On the ground, subtle biological reactions followed. Migratory animals hesitated in their paths. Schools of fish broke formation, redirecting as if sensing some unseeable field. Human perception also changed. In remote areas, people reported vivid dreams, memories that felt not their own. A strange sense of déjà vu tied to landscapes, monuments, or coastlines. Inside the cave, the researchers noticed the chamber itself was changing. The crystalline tablets refracted light differently. Their molecular patterns appeared to shift subtly, rearranging in accordance with the pulse. The inscriptions carved into the walls seemed to glow faintly, not with heat, not with electricity, but with resonance. The precessional ratios, the spiral of cycles, had begun to extend outward on their own. And then came the first unmistakable sign, a tectonic ripple across multiple continents. Not a full-scale earthquake, but a series of perfectly timed microquakes, registering along lines of ancient crustal weakness. They followed no known fault patterns, yet remained entirely predictable in their own hidden logic. Each microquake was precise, deliberate, almost as though the planet was testing its own resilience. The researchers were struck dumb. Their instruments were capturing data that no theory could explain. A coordinated, global, living calibration system that was acting upon the very crust of the Earth. Outside the cave, humanity remained unaware, but the signs were quietly accumulating. Electrical grids in certain regions experienced unexplainable fluctuations. GPS signals showed minor deviations. Even satellites designed to detect cosmic phenomena recorded faint low-frequency oscillations that seemed to originate from inside the Earth itself. Then the sphere pulsed again, more strongly than before. This time, the resonance propagated outward like a heartbeat, reaching the upper mantle, the oceans, and the atmosphere simultaneously. The effect was subtle but unmistakable. Climates began to respond. Regions that had been unusually stable for decades experienced rapid shifts. Monsoons arrived early, hurricanes developed in unusual zones, polar ice sheets melted and refroze in short cycles. Not destruction yet, but a warning, a demonstration of the system's ability to intervene. In the cave, the team realized the sphere was actively stabilizing the planet while simultaneously preparing it for something far larger. The spiral on the walls, which had remained incomplete for tens of thousands of years, now extended itself fully, calculating the next cycle, predicting its effects, and encoding the instructions into the environment itself. And then, the most unsettling revelation, the pulse aligned with the current human epoch. The system, it seemed, was aware of the species that inhabited it. Not out of benevolence, but because human activity was now a variable in the planetary equations. The planet's designers, or its own latent intelligence, had accounted for this, embedding humanity into the cycle as both observer and participant. The question now, whispered by every scientist who dared to think it aloud, was simple and terrifying. If the system decides that equilibrium cannot be maintained, if humanity pushes the planet toward thresholds too extreme, will the next reset spare this iteration of life? Or will we be another casualty in a cycle that has repeated countless times before our existence? The pulse deepened again, sending vibrations into the very core. The researchers felt it physically. A low hum, imperceptible to most, but registering as pressure against the chest, a reminder that the planet was not inert. It was alive, and it was thinking. The sphere, silent yet insistent, had begun the final countdown toward the next cycle, and humanity, as yet oblivious, was standing on the edge of something far older than itself. A system designed to endure beyond civilizations, beyond epochs, beyond memory. The only question now, would the system consider humanity ready or expendable? The first signs on the surface were almost imperceptible. Minor seismic shifts, barely measurable in populated areas, caused subtle tremors that went unnoticed by most humans. But in regions with ancient fault lines, the effect was immediate and unsettling. In the Himalayas, entire ridges seemed to settle by centimeters, creating new microfractures along slopes that had been stable for millennia. Avalanches occurred without warning, sweeping down valleys with the precision of a clockwork mechanism. In the Pacific, deep-sea hydrothermal vents released pulses of heat and chemicals in rhythmic patterns, altering local currents. Migrating whales and fish changed course, instinctively avoiding zones of invisible disturbance. In the skies, pilots reported unusual turbulence and anomalies in compass readings. Swarms of birds hesitated mid-flight, hovering as if sensing a disturbance in the air. And across deserts and plains, clouds formed intricate, almost geometric patterns, swirling in arcs that mirrored the inscriptions deep within the cave. Local populations reported strange auroras, faint but visible even in daylight, shimmering with colors no human eye had recorded before. Inside the cave, the researchers monitored the data in disbelief. The sphere's pulse had propagated through every layer of the planet, from core to surface, orchestrating the planet's systems in real time. One scientist, a geophysicist with decades of experience, whispered, "It's a managing the world itself, adjusting pressures, shifting currents, aligning the cycles. It's alive." Another, an archaeologist, added with awe, And we're in its final stage. This is the first time it has woken in our era. Everything we see, every change, it's a test or a preparation. The pulse intensified. Microquakes became synchronized across continents, moving along ancient pathways of tectonic stress. Rivers shifted course by centimeters, and even glaciers in the polar regions crept slightly faster, as if nudged by an invisible hand. Then came the unmistakable, undeniable sign. The magnetic field began to fluctuate rapidly. Satellites detected a sudden weakening along the equator, while compasses in the field labs spun wildly. Migratory animals deviated far from their normal paths. Global electrical grids experienced surges that engineers could not explain. The chamber's crystalline tablets responded, refracting the dim light of their instruments in strange, rhythmic pulses. The spiral of cycles carved into the walls now extended fully, mapping not only past resets but predicting the upcoming one with terrifying clarity. Outside, the world remained mostly oblivious. Humanity went about its daily life, unaware that the planet beneath them was actively recalibrating its systems, preparing for a threshold that could alter life on a global scale. And then, the sphere pulsed once more. A deep, resonant vibration that traveled through the mantle and crust, reaching every corner of the Earth simultaneously. This pulse was different. It was directive, not merely stabilizing. It encoded adjustments into the tectonics, the oceans, the atmosphere, and even the biosphere itself. The researchers realized the unthinkable. The sphere could reset civilizations if the system determined that equilibrium required it. But it also held the possibility of selectively preserving life, guiding evolution, and maintaining the conditions necessary for intelligent species to survive. In that moment, one truth became unavoidable. Humanity was not merely living on Earth. Humanity was inside a system, an engineered, intelligent, and deliberate system, and the next cycle was about to test the species' place within it. And far beneath the deepest layers, in hidden chambers yet unexplored, the biological cylinders remained. Templates of life that had been preserved through countless resets. Seeds of creatures, some extinct, some unknown, some perhaps precursors to humans themselves, waiting for the moment the sphere would determine their relevance. The sphere pulsed again, slower now, like a heartbeat, and with each pulse, the system communicated. Earth was alive, Earth was aware, and Earth was counting down toward the next cycle. Humanity had no idea, but the planet did, and the first visible consequences of the awakening were about to begin. The first visible consequences were subtle, almost imperceptible at first. Cities that had existed for centuries experienced minor yet unexplainable shifts, foundations settling unevenly, bridges vibrating without cause, high-rise windows rattling as if the planet itself were inhaling. Engineers blamed natural subsidence, geologists blamed minor faults, but none could account for the precision of the disturbances. They followed a rhythm, a pattern invisible to all but the instruments sensitive enough to detect it. In coastal regions, tides behaved erratically. Some days, waters receded far beyond normal, exposing mudflats and submerged ruins thought lost to history. On other days, waves surged unexpectedly, swallowing docks and sandbars, only to retreat moments later. Fishermen whispered of ghostly currents that guided schools of fish into unnatural paths, as if some invisible hand was testing the ocean's balance. Mountains and deserts were no longer inert. The Himalayas groaned faintly, glaciers shifting against centuries-old tracks. Avalanches released themselves without triggers. In the Gobi and Sahara, sands shifted in patterns that mimicked the spirals carved into the ancient chambers, dunes aligning themselves along invisible lines of force. Wildlife reacted in uncanny harmony. Herds of deer froze in place as though sensing vibrations beyond human perception. Migratory birds veered from their traditional routes, abandoning instinctual paths in favor of trajectories dictated by some unseen signal. Deep in the oceans, squadrons of whales and dolphins altered their courses simultaneously, synchronized by subtle electromagnetic fluctuations in the planet's magnetic field. Meanwhile, the air itself seemed alive. Clouds formed into geometric patterns that defied conventional meteorology, swirling in perfect arcs and circles that echoed the inscriptions the researchers had seen in the cave. Lightning struck in isolated, deliberate bursts, each strike avoiding inhabited areas but targeting geological formations with precision. The sky pulsed faintly with colors that humans could not categorize, auroras shimmering in regions far from the poles. Inside the cave, the team monitored these changes with awe and fear. Instruments recorded resonance patterns, vibrations, and magnetic anomalies beyond anything previously cataloged. The sphere pulsed again, slower, deeper, and more insistent than ever, sending waves of energy through the crystalline tablets, which now glowed in response. Their inscriptions shifted subtly, updating themselves as though encoding the new state of the planet in real time. The researchers realized the terrifying truth. The sphere was not merely observing. It was actively orchestrating. Mountains, oceans, ice sheets, and atmosphere were all instruments under its control. The biosphere itself was part of the system, every living organism a participant in a cycle that had been ongoing long before humans appeared. And then came the unmistakable sign of what the next cycle could bring. In a region of South America long believed geologically stable, a massive fault ruptured with perfect synchronization to the sphere's pulse. The quake was moderate, barely registering in human terms, yet its pattern indicated preparation. Rivers rerouted themselves, forested slopes adjusted, and landslides occurred exactly where geological models predicted they would only centuries later. It was a rehearsal, a calibration, the planet testing its systems. As night fell, the auroras intensified worldwide. People stared at the skies in awe, unaware that every movement of light, every flicker and swirl, was a message, encoded into the very fabric of the atmosphere by the awakening sphere. Those sensitive to its resonance, whether consciously or not, felt it in dreams and premonitions, a subtle insistence that something ancient, intelligent, and deliberate was watching, preparing, and waiting. The cycle was beginning, and humanity, for the first time, was standing not merely on Earth, but inside its engineered pulse, a living system far older and far more deliberate than any human understanding could grasp. The sphere's heartbeat continued, stronger now, echoing across continents, oceans, and deep into the mantle, signaling that the next phase of the planet's long and deliberate design was imminent. And then came the first unmistakable signs that the sphere's pulse was no longer subtle. In the Arctic, vast sheets of ice began to fracture with precision, splitting along lines that had been dormant for millennia. Glacial rivers surged with sudden force, carving new channels, rerouting water toward regions long thought impervious. Polar bears and seals scattered unpredictably, their instincts disrupted by shifts they could neither see nor understand. In the Amazon, ancient trees swayed against calm winds, roots adjusting minutely as if the soil itself were breathing. Canopies parted in strange, patterned gaps, revealing clearings that mirrored the spirals and ratios from the cave chamber. Birds that normally nested in isolated areas flew in coordinated formations across thousands of kilometers, moving as though pulled by an invisible current. Volcanic regions began to pulse. Smoke rose from Mount Etna, Popocatépetl, and the Kamchatka volcanoes, but instead of eruptions, the lava flows paused, receded, and resumed with uncanny rhythm. Seismographs captured waves moving in sequences that aligned perfectly with precessional cycles carved into the ancient chambers. Humanity called them anomalies, but they were rehearsals, calibrations, signals embedded into the living planet. Even the oceans became instruments. Currents shifted subtly. Tides accelerated and slowed in patterns imperceptible to the untrained eye, yet precise enough to nudge floating debris, plankton blooms, and marine life into predictable formations. Satellites picked up faint harmonic vibrations in the water column, as if the oceans themselves were humming along with the sphere's pulse. Cities began experiencing strange phenomena too. Power grids momentarily flickered in perfect synchronization across continents, streetlights pulsing in milliseconds-long intervals. Transportation networks experienced micro-delays, trains slowing and speeding inexplicably. Global communication systems registered anomalies that engineers could not trace to any known cause. Traffic lights, elevator systems, and electronic devices responded as though nudged by an invisible hand. The researchers in the cave watched in awe and fear. Each new observation confirmed the terrifying hypothesis. The sphere was not merely alive. It was actively orchestrating the planet's systems, coordinating geology, atmosphere, hydrology, and even biological life in real time. Every pulse was a calibration, every microquake a test, every ripple in the oceans a correction. And then came the first unmistakable human-scale effect. In a region of Japan, near an uninhabited volcanic island, the land suddenly rose several centimeters in a matter of hours. The coastline shifted, altering currents and sending tsunamis along predictable but previously impossible paths. They were small, too small to cause widespread destruction, but precise, calculated, deliberate. The planet was modifying itself, and humanity was embedded in the system, like insects on a living clockwork. The sphere pulsed again, deeper this time, sending vibrations that resonated through the very mantle. The crystalline tablets glowed brightly, etchings shifting to accommodate new calibrations. The inscriptions revealed a truth the researchers could scarcely comprehend. Earth had cycles longer than human history, and the next one was imminent. The biological cylinders in the hidden chamber quivered. Even the preserved templates of life seemed to respond to the pulse, tiny changes in their molecular structures aligning with the planet's rhythms. Life itself, past and present, was a part of the system. And then came the hum, a resonance so low, so profound, that the researchers felt it in their bones. The cave walls shivered faintly. The tablets refracted light into geometric patterns, projecting faint spirals onto the chamber floor. It was a countdown, encoded in vibration, light, and energy. The sphere's message was clear. The next phase had begun. The system was no longer calibrating. It was activating, and humanity, oblivious above ground, stood at the threshold of a planetary mechanism older than civilization itself. One that had guided evolution, engineered resets, and preserved life for millennia. And now that mechanism was preparing for its most decisive cycle yet. The sky over the northern hemisphere began to shift in ways no meteorologist could explain. Clouds formed immense spirals, stretching from the Arctic Circle down to mid-latitudes, moving in patterns that seemed to echo the inscriptions deep within the cave chambers. Winds accelerated along invisible corridors, raking across plains, deserts, and oceans alike, while currents in the Atlantic and Pacific began to oscillate in precise synchrony. In coastal cities, tides rose and fell with unnatural speed. Harbors emptied, then flooded, as if the oceans were being gently but deliberately rehearsed for some enormous performance. Fishermen reported that the water seemed to pulse, moving in waves that did not follow moon or sun. Along the western coasts of Africa and the Americas, beaches eroded overnight, shifting sands and exposing geological formations previously hidden for millennia. High-altitude storms ignited over regions normally considered stable. Lightning arced in symmetrical patterns, striking mountain peaks and plateaus in a calculated rhythm, leaving scorch marks that matched geometric ratios etched on the cave walls. In the deserts, temperature fluctuations became extreme. One day scorching heat, the next frost that froze shallow oases, all unfolding according to a pattern invisible to human instruments. Deep forests, jungles, and river valleys reacted as well. Trees subtly bent against the wind, their roots gripping and releasing in coordination with underground vibrations. Rivers altered their courses slightly, carving new channels and reshaping floodplains. Animal populations moved in synchronized patterns. Herds of deer, flocks of birds, and schools of fish all shifted according to the unseen rhythm, each living creature a participant in a planetary symphony. In urban centers, technology faltered. Power grids surged, then stabilized. Satellites blinked out of alignment before reorienting themselves. Trains, elevators, and automated systems hesitated, as if sensing a change in the very fabric of reality. Communications networks experienced micro-delays, synchronized globally, a subtle but undeniable sign that the planet itself was influencing human infrastructure. Inside the cave, the researchers could barely comprehend the scale of what they were witnessing. The crystalline tablets pulsed with an intensity previously unseen, their inscriptions reconfiguring in real time. The spirals of cycles extended outward like living diagrams, mapping not only the past resets but also the impending one. Every calculation etched in stone, every template preserved in the hidden cylinders, every vibration pulsing through the mantle, all converged in one undeniable truth. The next planetary cycle was no longer theoretical. It was imminent, and yet there was another layer of awareness creeping into the minds of those attuned to the pulse. It was subtle at first, a dream, a fleeting sense of déjà vu, a memory that could not belong to any one human life. But gradually, as the sphere's influence reached deeper into the biosphere, these impressions became more coherent. Images of long-lost civilizations, cities submerged beneath oceans, forests long vanished, and creatures extinct for tens of thousands of years flashed in sequence. Humanity was being reminded of its place within a cycle far older than its own history. The final warning came as a harmonic convergence, a resonance so low, so profound, that it vibrated through the planet's crust, through the oceans, and into the atmosphere. The sphere's pulse intensified, measured in deep seismic hums and magnetic oscillations that instruments struggled to record. It was no longer merely a calibration. It was an activation, and the researchers understood with chilling clarity. The sphere had completed its preparations. The system was about to initiate the cycle that would determine whether the planet could sustain life in its current form, whether humanity would survive as observers or participants, or whether this iteration would be swept away like all the others before it. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath. Mountains, rivers, oceans, forests, and skies all waited for the next pulse, the next correction, the next test. Humanity, still unaware above, teetered on the edge of an epical threshold. And beneath the deepest layers, the biological cylinders stirred faintly, as if sensing the imminent culmination of cycles that had persisted for tens of thousands of years. The sphere pulsed again, a low, deliberate heartbeat that echoed through the mantle and out into the world. The cycle was beginning, and there would be no turning back. The first true wave of change arrived not with a roar, but with a subtle shift so profound it redefined perception itself. Across the planet, landscapes moved in quiet, deliberate motions. Mountain ranges adjusted minutely along faults, rivers carved new channels in mere hours, and coastlines subtly reshaped themselves as though the earth was breathing, testing its own equilibrium. Storms erupted in geometric precision. Hurricanes and cyclones formed along invisible lines of energy, curving and dissipating according to patterns that mirrored the spirals inscribed in the cave. Lightning struck in rhythmic sequences, scorching peaks and plateaus in alignment with tectonic pulses. Even the sky seemed to hum with resonance, auroras shimmering far beyond the poles, visible in regions previously untouched by such phenomena. Cities felt the pulse. Buildings that had stood for centuries vibrated in synchrony with underground tremors. Bridges flexed, subway tunnels quivered, and electrical grids flickered with a precision that defied any known explanation. Humanity noticed fragments. Odd weather, unusual tides, fleeting seismic quakes, but none could grasp the orchestrated scope of the event. In the oceans, currents moved in perfect harmony with the sphere's rhythm. Fish, whales, and migratory patterns adjusted instinctively. Coral reefs bent, rivers pulsed with surges, and the tides themselves seemed to anticipate the pulse, receding and flooding in a way that hinted at intelligence rather than natural law. Inside the cave, the team of researchers watched the crystalline tablets pulse brighter than ever. The spirals of cycles now extended fully, connecting past resets with the imminent one. Each curve and line encoded instructions, adjustments, and corrections, Earth's own operating system, revealed in stone, crystal, and vibration. The biological cylinders quivered as if alive, their templates for life responding to the pulse. The sequence of amino acids, long dormant, shimmered with energy, as though the planet were priming the next generation of life. And then came the moment the sphere made itself undeniably known. A low-frequency resonance surged through the mantle and crust, felt as a pressure in the chest, a vibration in the bones, and a subtle hum in the air. It was not destructive, yet it was commanding. It was an awakening of the planet's consciousness, deliberate, intelligent, and precise. Humanity, for the first time, became fully aware. People around the globe experienced a sudden clarity, a collective sense that the world had always been alive, that life was part of a grand design, and that the planet itself was watching, testing, and guiding. Dreams, memories of lost civilizations, visions of cities buried beneath ice and sand, and fleeting impressions of other cycles flooded consciousness. The recognition was universal, subtle but undeniable. The world had been engineered, and humans were now participants, not mere observers. The sphere pulsed one final time. The harmonic resonance stabilized the planet, adjusting tectonic stress, regulating currents, and harmonizing the atmosphere. Catastrophic thresholds were avoided, but not without consequences. Some species flourished unexpectedly. Others dwindled as ecosystems shifted. Land and sea were altered, subtly but permanently, marking the planet's next phase. Humanity had survived the test not by accident, but by being an integral part of the system itself. The researchers stepped outside the cave. The sun was higher than ever, casting long shadows across a transformed landscape. Mountains, rivers, and forests now held a pattern, a design visible only to those who could perceive the planet's pulse. Humanity remained fragile, yet alive, part of a system far older and wiser than any civilization. And the sphere, hidden in the depths, quieted. Its pulse slowed to a gentle hum, as if satisfied. The cycle had ended and the world had passed the test. Yet a lingering awareness remained. The planet's intelligence was eternal, its memory vast, and its cycles unyielding. Humanity's tenure was a gift, fragile and precious, dependent not on dominance but on harmony with the system that had created it. Perhaps the deepest legacy of the builders of the spheres and of the cycles was not material at all. Perhaps it was the understanding that intelligence exists beyond human perception, patience beyond human lifespans, and purpose beyond human comprehension. And as the first stars appeared in a sky reshaped by the pulse of an awakened Earth, one thought persisted quietly, universally. Humanity is not the first, and it may not be the last. But for now, it has been given a chance to witness the design, to learn, and to endure. The sphere rested. The cycle was complete. The planet waited. And humanity, finally aware of the system it lived within, could choose how to move forward.